It's unlikely anyone could have predicted that true enlightenment would descend in a place full of exquisite treats, strained smiles, and artificial light. The very thought of it seems absurd, but strangely enough, that's exactly what happened. The realization struck amidst a bustling reception, against the backdrop of an ice sculpture shaped like a corporate logo, to the sounds of a saxophone playing Marvin Gaye. The protagonist of this story is a modest 43-year-old IT analyst from Roanoke, Virginia. His wardrobe consists of only 3 cardigans, which he wears in rotation, creating a sort of uniform. When the atmosphere around him becomes too tense, he starts counting ceiling tiles. This helps him focus and detach from the noise. He was never known for articulating his thoughts boldly, defending his own beliefs, or simply drawing attention to himself. He belonged to that category of people who automatically apologize, even if someone accidentally bumps into them in a crowd, as if they were to blame for what happened. He was the type who would add apologies for the delayed response to emails, even if he sent it just a few minutes after receiving it. In essence, he was the kind of man women typically didn't notice, except when they urgently needed help recovering a corrupted PDF file or solving some complex technical problem. His wife's name was Kendra. She possessed dazzling beauty, magnetic charm, and a mind as sharp as a glass razor. In the past, she simply called him Al. This short, intimate nickname inexplicably made him feel more significant, taller than he actually was, instilling a certain confidence in him. They had been married for 8 years. They had no children, only 2 goldfish they regularly forgot to feed, which was a kind of metaphor for their neglect. Lately, unfortunately, there had been more evenings when Kendra stayed late at work. He would remain alone in their quiet, empty apartment, looking at the hopeful dinner, now cold, and wondering if she still loved mushroom risotto, or if it was just another pretense she expertly played to please him or maintain the facade of a happy family life. This uncertainty gnawed at him. But the fateful moment that radically changed his existence did not come in the form of a trivial message on a phone screen, nor a telltale lipstick stain on clothing, nor even a blunt, disheartening confession. It was merely a feather, a single black feather, as if dropped by a raven. It was carefully, almost tenderly, tucked away deep inside her work notebook, lost among pages filled with her impeccable handwriting and interspersed with multicolored notes about countless business meetings. He discovered this ominous find purely by chance while searching for a document she needed. Jokingly, he asked her about the artifact's origin, naively believing it was just a trendy new talisman, a fresh symbol, or an element of another creative marketing stunt she was always so keenly interested in. In response, she froze, as if caught red-handed, and then her face lit up with a smile so slow and unnaturally demure that it was immediately obvious. It was fake. "It's nothing," she stammered. "Just an innocent joke, our little secret with colleagues." And the conversation ended there. She hastily retreated to the bathroom, leaving him standing in the middle of the room with that ominous black feather in his hand. It felt weightless, yet it seared his palm like a red-hot coal, piercing his skin with an invisible flame. People say that the inner voice, intuition, is all-knowing. In this situation, intuition wasn't just signaling. It was screaming, tormenting the protagonist's soul. However, following his usual pattern of behavior, He chose to remain silent. This silence persisted even when his wife discovered another suspicious omen, a feather left on her car seat after returning from an important meeting. He didn't utter a word when he noticed a change in her mobile phone password, or when she started humming unfamiliar tunes in the shower with a mysterious smile, as if addressed to an invisible admirer. The protagonist continued to wait, like a coward, as he had so many times in his life, until that fateful gala evening arrived. The moment she reached for his hand, he finally whispered the words that seemed forever stuck in his throat. But the author intends to return to this climactic moment of the narrative. First, it is necessary to tell the reader about the events preceding that evening, about the discoveries that were made, the emotional torment the protagonist endured, and what he witnessed firsthand. This is a story about how a quiet, unassuming man, who preferred to remain in the shadows and avoided any confrontation, reached the limits of his patience, leading to irreversible changes in his inner world. On a Tuesday, a few days before the formal gala, a moment of profound emotional crisis occurred. An ominous, unfamiliar silence reigned in the apartment. There were no gentle jazz melodies from Kendra's Spotify playlists, nor the familiar jingle of her keys when she returned late at night, pretending to be surprised by her own arrival. He was still awake. In that silence, there was only him, a mug of weak tea, and a laptop bag left by the door, like a silent reminder of what was happening. This expensive brown leather bag, polished to a shine and costing a fortune, had recently appeared in his field of vision more often than his wife's face. For months, he had felt like an outsider, a temporary guest in his own marriage, orbiting her life without finding a point of connection or feeling like a part of it. She was constantly busy, either on the phone, preparing an important presentation, or simply saying she was tired. That's how she now described her state. Just tired. As if his very presence, his breathing in the same room with her, exhausted her to the limit. He couldn't pinpoint exactly what happened to him that evening. Perhaps it was the raven's feather, still hidden in his nightstand drawer, a reminder of the strange lie, or perhaps it was the fact that for several weeks he hadn't heard her genuine laughter directed at him, hadn't felt her joy in their shared space. But that night, when she left to grab drinks with the team, another one of her new excuses, he did something he never imagined. He checked her voicemail. He admits that the act he committed doesn't fill him with pride. He emphasizes that he's not the type to pry into others' secrets or engage in espionage. On the contrary, he sees himself as someone who leaves small tokens of affection, like sticky notes with friendly messages, believing that's how true love manifests. However, on that ill-fated evening, something inside him snapped and his patience reached its limit. He knew her password, the same combination of characters she habitually used everywhere. The name of their first cat, spelled with a whimsical capitalization. When the voicemail notification appeared on the phone screen, he found 3 messages there. He listened to only one, and that was enough. The voice belonged to a man, calm, confident, and unequivocal. A tone that required no justification, but was an assertion in itself. The stranger didn't state his name, only said, "Got your note, it made me smile. I'll be in black, room 714, just like last time. Don't forget your wicked laugh, you owe me." He froze as if deprived of breath, for a long 30 seconds. Then he replayed the message. Despite his trembling hands, he persistently pressed the replay button, desperately trying to convince himself that he had misheard, that it was just an absurd joke. But deep inside, something nodded affirmatively, as if it had long awaited this moment of bitter truth. It seemed every cell in his body knew it, even before his mind could grasp the full depth of what was happening. That fateful night, he suppressed a storm of emotions. The absence of furious reproaches and tearful confrontations was dictated by his imperturbable nature. The next morning, as she casually draped her blazer over her shoulders, then nonchalantly inquired about the morning coffee, he remained silent, piercing her with his gaze. At that moment, a thought sharp as a dagger pierced his mind. How many times had he personally prepared her breakfast, while her lips still bore the imprint of another's kiss? That ill-fated day, he cancelled all work plans, citing a sudden indisposition. He spent long hours wandering around the living room, pointlessly opening and closing the refrigerator door, as if searching for answers to his tormenting questions there. In a state of complete emotional paralysis, he mechanically picked up her handbag, with no intention of spying, but simply unable to cope with the flood of searing pain. It was then that his gaze fell upon her ID badge, which had been replaced with a completely different one. The second badge, black and gold, had no name, but was adorned with the image of a raven. And at that moment it dawned on him again, with frightening clarity, recalling the feathers he had found earlier. All the pieces of the mosaic clicked into a single terrifying picture. That ill-fated night, she never returned. Instead, a short message lit up his phone screen. "Don't wait, honey. Non-stop brainstorming here. LOL. Kisses." The LOL echoed strangely, a word completely alien to her usual vocabulary. Another subtle yet telling detail. His reply caught in his throat. The man simply turned off his phone, curled up on the couch, and sank into an endless wait. Time stood still, and only at 5 or 12 a.m. did the creak of the front door break the silence, followed by the muffled clatter of heels dropped in the dimly lit hallway. She probably thought he was asleep, and in a way, he was. Not yet fully grasping the scale of the tragedy, he understood that the part of his soul that had loved her so sincerely and selflessly had irrevocably died that night. The man who spent nights planning their anniversaries, who noticed the slightest nuances in her life, be it a change in shampoo scent or a new shade of lipstick, who showered her with sweet trifles without any reason. He seemed to vanish into thin air along with that treacherous message. Only a shadow of his former self remained, embodied in a new man, coldly counting the days until the upcoming gala. He knew he would attend, and had already firmly decided to wear the very grey suit she despised, with a collar showing signs of wear, and to complete the look with old, worn-out sneakers instead of polished shoes. This wasn't an attempt to impress her or win back what was lost. It was dictated by a vital need to show her exactly what she had destroyed. He wanted to stand tall, with his head held high, when she might try to reach for the fragments of their past happiness, for what was left of him. The official invitation to the gala appeared in his email 3 days before the event. His name shouldn't have been on the guest list. He had never attended such formal events before. They were exclusively for company executives and their spouses. But there it was, on the monitor screen, clearly evident, sent by the Vice President's assistant. His name, surprisingly, was spelled correctly, which in itself was unusual. A small golden digital envelope shimmered at the top of the screen. The email subject read, "You are cordially invited to the annual Blackwell and Eastston Heritage Evening." He stared at the invitation and for a long time, but not out of surprise. No, something deep inside, his gut feeling, told him she was behind it all. Every stroke of that invitation felt like her handiwork, done at the last minute, with a certain flair for drama, yet subtle enough to appear completely accidental. He vividly imagined her smirking at her desk, believing this might be her olive branch, a gesture of reconciliation. She must have thought he would come, put on a mask of indifference, play the role of the loving husband in front of her colleagues, and return home, pretending that nothing that had happened had affected or broken him. But she completely failed to understand that he was going there, not for her. Not anymore. His motives were entirely different. A day before the significant event, the protagonist did something completely unexpected for himself. He went to a tattoo parlor just a few blocks from his home. It wasn't an ultra-modern place with neon lights and trendy music, but rather a modest, dusty workshop, where an elderly artist named Well worked. He smelled of machine oil, and his hands were adorned with tattoos of poetic verses. The protagonist wasn't aiming for anything flashy or provocative. He simply had one word tattooed on the inside of his left wrist, a place visible only to him when his shirt sleeve was slightly pulled up. That word was enough. Not an impulsive decision, not an act of revenge, not an attempt to impress, but merely a constant reminder of the moment he stopped waiting to be chosen for someone else to determine his fate. It became his personal declaration of self-sufficiency. That same evening, his wife returned home earlier than usual. To everyone's surprise, she brought groceries, cooked pasta, meticulously set the table, and brought out their best dinnerware. She even lit the candle they had brought back from Charleston for their 3rd wedding anniversary. The one whose scent, she claimed, reminded her of the ocean and vanilla, conjuring memories of their shared dreams. The protagonist ate almost nothing. "Are you worried about the event?" she asked during dinner, casually twirling pasta onto her fork. "You haven't confirmed your attendance yet, have you?" He swallowed, pretending to be engrossed in his plate of noodles. "I decided I'd go," he replied in a level voice. "It seemed important to you." She paused for a moment, but he noticed it. Something subtle flickered in her eyes, surprise, then relief, and perhaps a faint pang of guilt. But it vanished instantly. She smiled again. That same practiced smile she displayed at important client meetings, flawless and false. "Everything will be fine," she said, as if trying to convince herself. "We haven't been out together in a long time." There was an undeniable truth in her words. Indeed, our joint outings as a couple had ceased almost 4 months ago. There were no more romantic dinners, no spontaneous dates, none of those carefree strolls in the nearby park that had once been our unbreakable tradition. We had turned into 2 strangers forced to share an apartment, where every step echoed in the ringing silence, as if we were navigating a minefield of unspoken grievances and unspoken words. That night, tossing and turning without sleep, I could only hear my companion's steady breathing. She had her back to me, as on many previous nights, erecting an invisible yet palpable wall between us. Gazing at the ceiling, I caught the fleeting glints of headlights from passing cars, sliding across the glass, and involuntarily wondered how far apart two people must drift to feel utterly alien to each other, while sharing the same bed, as if the intimacy that once seemed unbreakable had never existed between us. Waking up in the morning brought an unexpected surprise. At the foot of the bed lay a neatly wrapped box, tied with a bright gift ribbon, with an attached note reading, "For tomorrow night, K." Inside was an elegant dark blue silk tie from a renowned designer. I instantly recognized the brand, as I had encountered it before, on a receipt I accidentally found a month ago, which, she claimed, was intended for an important client. The tie still had its tag, and it exuded the fresh, characteristic scent of a new item. I held it in my hands, as if it held some deep symbolism. But alas, that was far from the truth. It was neither a gesture of reconciliation, nor an attempt to restore a lost connection. It was merely a carefully crafted mask, designed to make me conform to an image, play my assigned role, and not ask too many questions. But now I had accumulated too many questions, and I was no longer willing to keep them to myself. The time for pretense was irrevocably gone. The evening of the long-awaited gala crept in unnoticed, as if enveloped in a dense, impenetrable shroud of grey fog that seemed to penetrate the very depths of the soul, seeping under the skin with the slightest contact with the outside world. The car cut through the night's gloom in heavy silence, each passenger immersed in their own world. Kendra seemed completely oblivious to her surroundings, her fingers mindlessly tapping on her phone screen throughout the journey, her mind entirely absorbed in virtual reality. The author caught fleeting reflections on her face several times, bright flashes of emojis, some elusive images that were impossible to make out properly, and a kaleidoscope of laughing faces. None of these gestures of attention were meant for him. The hotel, as if plucked from the pages of a glossy magazine, struck the imagination with its luxury and splendor. Crystal chandeliers sparkled everywhere, countless mirrors reflected every step, as if each movement cost a fortune. Walking through the marble lobby, the author involuntarily noted how Kendra transformed. Her back straightened, her gait became more confident, and her hand lightly brushed his arm, but didn't linger. Her gaze, like a scanner, ceaselessly surveyed the crowd, even before they reached the ballroom. It became obvious that she was looking for someone, and that person was clearly not him. This cold, detached observations only fueled his internal suspicions, intensifying his oppressive premonition. The interior of the hall was a kaleidoscope of dark men's suits and shimmering silver women's dresses, the clinking of crystal glasses, and strained, unnatural laughter. The tables were stunningly adorned, tall vases with dazzling white lilies, and exotic, as if frozen in dance, branches created an atmosphere of mystery and unspoken words. In the far corner of the hall, a jazz trio blared deafeningly, mercilessly drowning out all attempts at casual conversation, while waiters flitted between guests like shadows, balancing trays laden with miniature appetizers whose names eluded comprehension. Kendra, with a professional politician's smile, gracefully led her companion through the crowd of colleagues and department heads, introducing him in her light, casual tone, as if he were merely a part of her evening attire. "Here are my watch, my clutch, and this is my husband." The man mechanically shook hands, nodded in agreement, and uttered routine, Safe phrases such as, "Nice to meet you," or "Looks like a great turnout tonight." But in reality, he barely paid attention to the faces of these people. His thoughts relentlessly returned to the disturbing voicemail, to the mysterious raven feathers, to the second badge without a name, and to the oppressive feeling that, with each forced, polite conversation, sank deeper into his soul, squeezing it and causing suffocation. Approximately an hour later, Kendra, offering apologies, announced an urgent need to contact the public relations coordinator. She gave the narrator a quick and detached kiss on the cheek, as if rewarding a child for good behavior, and instantly vanished into a whirl of luxurious evening gowns and elegant tuxedos. The narrator did not follow her. Instead, he slowly made his way to the bar, where he ordered a simple soda. No lime, no garnishes, just something to hold in his hand to conceal the emotional emptiness he felt. As he slowly sipped his drink, observing the scene around him, a man appeared next to him, tall, with an upright posture, dressed in a black suit, a black shirt without a tie. He didn't even glance his way. His gaze was fixed on the room, studying the crowd like a predator scanning a field for prey. The narrator recognized him instantly, though he had never seen his face before. He recognized him by the raven badge, shining brightly on his lapel, a symbol identical to the one on Kendra's secret badge. The man casually leaned against the bar and quietly said something to the bartender. His voice. It was unmistakable. It precisely matched the voice from that voicemail message, as if that sound carried memories of that night, penetrating deep into his soul. And then it dawned on the narrator. He realized with terrifying clarity who this man was to Kendra. It became perfectly clear to the protagonist exactly what his chosen one was doing during her mysterious night brainstorming sessions and urgent presentations. One would think he should have been overcome by unbridled fury, consuming rage, an uncontrollable desire to smash the glass in his hand, but nothing of the sort happened. He was consumed by a strange, all-encompassing emptiness, a bottomless void within, so vast that the noisy vivacity of the hall could not reach it, could not fill it. And at that very moment, she reappeared, Kendra, gliding smoothly across the parquet floor in her elegant dark blue dress, with a strained, unnaturally bright smile, moving too quickly, as if following pre-rehearsed movements. The protagonist watched as she headed straight for him. Not for him. He noticed her hand briefly, for a fraction of a second, just barely touch the sleeve of his jacket, a gesture so fleeting and polished that an outside observer would likely not have paid it any mind. But the protagonist noticed. He saw absolutely everything, and the sight was unbearably painful. As if sensing his intense gaze, she slowly turned her head towards him. Her smile faltered for a moment, for the briefest fraction of a second. A single blink, that was enough for the protagonist to grasp the full depth of the deception. Then, pretending nothing unusual had happened, she headed towards him, skillfully navigating the crowd like the seasoned actress she essentially was. It was at that moment that it struck him like lightning. A crushing realization came. The woman with whom he had linked his life was not, in fact, coming to him with sincere feelings. She was coming to her alibi, and that alibi was himself. The protagonist gripped his glass tighter and took a slow, deep breath through his nose, trying to compose himself, to prepare for the inevitable. Because when she reached for him, when she extended her graceful hand, still adorned with the gold bracelet he had given her for their 5th anniversary. He was going to do something he had never in his life imagined. He was going to completely dismantle this meticulously crafted scenario. And for the first time in years, he was not going to force a smile in return and accept this lie. She extended her hand in a familiar gesture, full of grace and confidence, unerringly expecting him, as before, to succumb to this dance of pretense, honed over years. Her fingers, like the petals of an exotic flower, touched his wrist, offering a deceptive sense of connection and solace. However, everything within him rebelled against this touch, as if a piece of ice had been pressed against a bleeding wound. He looked at her, for the first time in a long time, truly trying to discern the truth behind the mask of impeccable makeup, expensive dress, and dazzling smile, equally suitable for business negotiations and Sunday breakfast. And in the depths of her eyes, he saw neither love nor even a shadow of remorse. Only a cold, calculating mind reigned there, calculating options and strategies in which he no longer had a place. Leaning in so their conversation would remain unnoticed by outsiders, close enough for her to feel the full weight of his words, he said in a quiet, calm voice, "Not after this." In these words resonated a verdict on their past, and a determination to build a new future where there would be no room for falsehoods and manipulation. Contrary to his naive expectations, her face betrayed neither despair nor horror. Instead, a fleeting confusion flashed across it, which she immediately skillfully concealed, taking a sharp breath and tensing her jaw. She blinked a couple of times, and her hand froze in the air between them, fingers nervously twitching, as if hastily devising a new plan to salvage the evening. However, it was already too late. He straightened, took a step back, and placed his untouched glass on the bar. A soft click, which sounded much louder to him than the hum of the crowded hall, marked the end. He didn't make a scene. No shouts, no accusations, no pleas for explanations followed. He simply left, one step, then another, and the crowd swallowed him, hiding him from view. Behind him, he heard her soft call by his name, as if calling a dog, expecting it to instantly come running at her first summons, but he didn't stop, didn't turn back, and didn't even flinch. He continued to move through the ballroom, past the fake smiles and clinking glasses, past the mirrored walls reflecting a version of himself he no longer recognized. Finally, he made his way to the lobby, passed through the heavy gold-trimmed doors, and stepped out into the night. The fog had thickened, enveloping the city in a damp, heavy silence, as if the world itself had paused to witness this ending. On the sidewalk, his shoulders slumped under the burden of what he had endured. It seemed he would collapse any moment, but he stood firm, slowly making his way to the car. He sank into the driver's seat and froze in the dim light, gripping the steering wheel. Deep breaths brought no relief. The bitter betrayal was firmly ingrained in his mind. His phone vibrated wildly in his pocket, as if seized by a fever. He didn't need to look at the screen. He knew it was her. He vividly imagined her alone in the ballroom's shining light, panic gradually engulfing her, as she realized control was irrevocably lost. She was skilled at manipulation, but not this time. He didn't answer the call, didn't even read the messages multiplying by the second. Instead, he started the engine and drove away, not home, not to the life built on half-truths and silent sacrifices. He drove nowhere, along the sleepy arteries of the night city, letting the streets carry him further and further from his former self. That night, not only a marriage ended, it was the finale of his role, the role of the quiet, all-forgiving man, one who mistakenly took long-suffering for love and endurance for loyalty. He didn't know where his road led, but for the first time in years, he was choosing the direction himself, and that feeling granted him long-awaited freedom. In the days that followed, he realized a bitter truth that neither marriage counselors nor sad love songs warn about. The deepest wounds are inflicted not by arguments or open conflicts, but by the silence that comes after. The silence of waking alone in a strange room, staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, desperately trying to remember how he could have believed that love could be mended with apologies and shared vacations, the silence of turning off his phone because he could no longer bear to see her name appear on the screen again and again, triggering a new wave of pain, the silence in his head, where the same question echoed, "Is it me? Is it something I did or didn't do?" He found refuge with an old college friend, Nolan. Nolan had a small spare room above his garage, permeated with the scent of turpentine and old newspapers. But at least the place was real. Without gloss or pretense, Nolan didn't ask too many questions, which was a true salvation for him. He merely grunted quietly when he appeared at the doorstep with a travel bag, and silently handed him a bottle of beer. He didn't need to ask, he understood everything. Kendra, meanwhile, tried to fill the void left by his departure with thousands of desperate attempts to win him back. Voicemails, emails, messages from mutual friends, half-truths skillfully disguised as confessions, tearful declarations, promises of counseling, pleas for one last meeting, just to talk. She even sent a long handwritten letter on expensive paper, full of shaky apologies and desperate attempts to justify her actions. She felt lost. She needed thrills. She didn't mean to hurt him. She tried to twist the story so that they were both to blame, as if he had pulled away, and she had simply stumbled into another's arms by accident, due to loneliness. As if betrayal was just an accident, like a puddle on the sidewalk, he didn't reply. Not because he wanted to hurt her, but because for the first time he understood replying would mean continuing the pretense that what was broken between them could be mended with beautiful words and staged dates. And he was done pretending. His patience had snapped. Meanwhile, in the corporate environment, as often happens in large organizations, the grapevine mechanism began to churn. Rumors about Kendra and the mysterious man wearing the Raven badge spread through the office corridors with the speed of a wildfire. Thanks to Nolan's girlfriend, who worked just 2 floors below, it became known that HR had initiated a discreet but thorough investigation after receiving a number of anonymous complaints. Apparently, the author wasn't the only one who noticed the strange after-hours meetings, unexpected career accelerations, and the sense of untouchability surrounding some executives. Retribution, perhaps, doesn't always come instantly, but it is inevitable and thorough. However, despite all this news, it had lost its former significance for the author. His personal confrontation was not directed against Kendra, nor even against the man she had chosen. The true struggle was with that part of himself that naively believed loyalty could earn love, that by being good enough, one could achieve reciprocity. Every night, falling asleep on the guest bed at Nolan's house, accompanied by the chirping of crickets and the rumble of passing trucks, the author immersed himself in thoughts of the years invested in a marriage that by its end had turned into a fiction. He recalled every minor betrayal that was either unnoticed or ignored, every insult forgiven without the slightest demand for compensation. It was then that a simple and obvious truth dawned on him, one he should have grasped long ago. The author had been starving in that relationship, contenting himself with meager crumbs instead of a full feast. The most bitter part wasn't Kendra's betrayal, but that he had betrayed himself by remaining silent and allowing it to continue for so long. The darkness that had long oppressed his soul began to gradually recede, like the first rays of sun, breaking through a scarred horizon. The future appeared hazy and uncertain to him, as if shrouded in a thick veil. However, he was firmly convinced of one thing: she would have no place in his future life. After everything that had happened, it was impossible. 6 weeks after his departure, he calmly and without emotional outbursts signed all the divorce papers. There was no room for theatrical displays or tearful pleas in the courtroom. Just a few cold, dispassionate signatures beneath lines of legal text that clearly divided their shared life into separate parts: assets, liabilities, freedom. That evening, when all formalities were settled, Kendra once again tried to contact him by phone. He ignored her call and didn't even listen to the voicemail she left. Some doors, once slammed shut, should not be opened again, no matter how much they are knocked upon. And deep down, he felt, they both understood this. It was an unspoken but unconditional realization. He settled into a modest apartment located above a bookstore in the heart of the city. It was a quirky, cozy dwelling with floors far from perfectly level, and a faucet that played its own tunes at night, as if performing a quiet serenade. Though not a mansion, it was his personal space. There was no room here for meticulously selected photographs hung on the walls or fake smiles captured in gleaming frames. Only stacks of books, a well-worn but still comfortable sofa, and a window that, surprisingly, caught the rays of the setting sun. At first, loneliness seemed unbearable, a cruel burden. Sometimes, in the mornings, he would wake with a heavy feeling in his chest, and he had to sit on the edge of the bed, taking slow, deep breaths to convince himself of the correctness of his decision. But gradually, this pain began to subside, becoming more tolerable. And then, quite unexpectedly, one day he realized it had vanished without a trace. He resumed running, an activity he had neglected since college, and not to prepare for any competitions, but simply for the incredible feeling of his heart beating rapidly for something else, not out of fear or sadness. He started visiting Nolan and his girlfriend more often for dinners, laughing heartily at their not always successful jokes, staying up late because it felt so good to feel seen and accepted without any conditions. He even started painting, an activity he had always secretly dreamed of, but never found the courage for, considering it foolish or impractical. It turned out that simply smearing paint on a canvas, without caring about the result, became the most liberating experience of his life. One evening, while browsing the shelves of the bookstore downstairs, he met her. Her name was Darcy. She wasn't glamorous or dressed as if she'd stepped off a fashion magazine cover. She wore glasses that seemed too large for her face, and she always carried a faint scent of sawdust and lavender. She spoke of books as if they were living beings, as if every story held deep meaning for her. And when she smiled, her smile wasn't practiced or feigned. It was genuine. They weren't rushing anything. They didn't pretend to be more healed than they actually were. They were simply two wounded souls, finding solace in each other's company, one awkward coffee date after another. And that was enough, more than enough. Sometimes fate presents surprising turns, where the bitterest trials become gateways to long-awaited freedom. Severe heart wounds, as if burning away all excess, create space for something bright and unknown, for a new page in life. There is no room in his soul for malice or resentment towards Kendra. He wishes her no ill will, only hopes that she finds the very honesty she so lacked in their relationship. He sincerely wants to believe that she will find what she was searching for during those long nights, choosing someone else. As for the author, he found something far greater than just the ability to forgive. He found himself, and now he intends to cherish this new-found identity, never abandoning it under any circumstances. It is his most valuable treasure, the alpha and omega of his existence,